for people experiencing disability and hope you'll find this in a way that you can apply to both programming or your facilities or creating a more welcoming and inclusive staff environment as well. So the Stedford Center is located within the University of Alberta, which is on the traditional territory of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe nations. The land's now known as Treaty 6 and the homeland of the Métis. The University of Alberta respects the sovereignty, lands, histories, knowledge systems, and the culture that the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations and the Studward Center would like to acknowledge gratitude for the guardianship of this land, as well as acknowledge our own responsibilities towards reconciliation. So I'm Carrie. I'm the Community Impact Coordinator at the Stedward Center, which is a role that encompasses a lot of different things. I do some research coordination, community outreach, professional development for recreation parks, as well as education. And I do still do a little bit of children's programs at the Stedward Center. My contact info is there and it will come back again at the end if you want to grab it. So the Stedford Center, if you haven't heard of us before, like I mentioned, we're located within the Faculty of Kinesiology, Sport, and Recreation at the University of Alberta, with the mission to inspire individual achievement in adapted physical activity and parasport through applying innovative research, sharing our expertise, delivering highly successful programming with and for individuals experiencing disability. So some of the areas that we offer our services in are the fitness center, where we have adapted fitness equipment and FES, so functional electronic stimulation. We also have Free to Be Me, which is our children's programs, which run in both one-on-one and group sessions. We also offer classes and one-on-ones kind of throughout the lifespan. So those can look like a fitness class or personal training. And then we also have a branch of competitive parasport, which right now is focusing on swim and athletics, so track and field. And our values, you can see the values of the Stedward Center listed here, but kind of a core value that I want to bring your attention to, especially for today, is embodied ways of knowing, which is kind of a fancy sentence for the value that we believe that living with an impairment is best understood by those living with the impairment. They are the experts in their bodies, in their ways of knowing, in how their mind works. So their lived experience is the expertise, and we are only as strong as our relationships, and we work collaboratively to develop our programming and bring forward education that's going to be relevant to communities as well. So why are we here today and what is our purpose? So it is to remember that equity, diversity, and inclusion is more than a trend. It is a fundamental part of building active communities. And we know that many communities are ready to take that step, are interested to take that step, but sometimes are not sure where to begin. So hopefully today we will get into an intro, a foundation of how to build more inclusive spaces with people experiencing disability in mind. So today we'll cover understandings of disability and language uses, accessible and inclusive considerations for facilities or the workplace, which often kind of collapse in the parks and recreation space, and creating inclusion collaboratively with people experiencing disability. So applying a disability lens, so we're going to think about disability concepts and kind of the current state today. This image is from Stats Canada and provides some insight into the demographic of Canadians currently experiencing disability. About a quarter of Canadians experience disability, and more people have disabilities as they age. Also looking at the statistics, you can see that folks that have disability often experience more than one. People with disabilities are a quarter of the population, but do we think this is reflected in representations that we see um, in our media and even in ads and communication that we receive? For example, think about what an active person looks like. Maybe you have them in your mind. So, what should an active person look like? In looking for images or searching stock photos, the term active person was used to generate these three images. These photos show a male presenting person doing a chin up. They have muscular arms. They don't appear to have an impairment. There's an image of a group yoga class in which all the bodies are kind of thin. They're performing the same yoga move in the same way. And there's also the last image is a female presenting person running up a set of stadium stairs. They also appear to have a pretty thin, lean body and do not appear to have an impairment. If you take a moment to look at these bodies, they might be what we could call like a stereotypical representation of an active person. Also of note, most of these bodies are white presenting as well. There's not a lot of diversity in body shape or size, um, and this is often what comes to us when we're looking for active images. So what about this? Based on their criteria from the last slide, these images would not be considered to be active people. The bodies are of different sizes and shapes. There's an image of a man using a power wheelchair who's moving differently than the instructor beside him. There's an image of two sprinters, both of whom have arm amputations. And finally, there's an image of a person with Down syndrome performing a yoga pose whose body might not be described as thin. To find these images, you would have to use search terms that also include disability and impairment, as they don't meet those so-called standards for human movement that we tend to categorize active people through. So we know when we look closer that this is representative of active people, of active bodies, people participating in physical activity, but often it is not what is represented or considered when we think about that category. This can go further when we think about what attributes we prioritize and value in our society. It leaves little room for other ways of being or doing things. So if we consider those values, we might think about time, such as arriving on time for meetings, events, and classes. Those who arrive late can be looked down upon. Arriving more on time can also be challenging and requires a lot of control over your daily activities that someone waiting for accessible transit or personal care support, they might not be able to meet those schedule demands in the same way that someone who doesn't rely on accessible transit or doesn't require personal care support might be able to achieve. Also, thinking about speed and efficiency. Completing tasks with speed and efficiency is often considered better. To be more productive, to do things fast, to do things with mobility, with little time lost. But this also privileges bodies that move or work in one way. It leaves little room for bodies that move slowly, complete tasks differently, or just need more time to do quality work. Accuracy. So that might include things like completing fine motor tasks, being efficient, having accuracy and control in your movements. Again, you can do something efficient and in less time. This is also something we tend to value in our society, but is again only one way of doing a task. And intelligence. In school, students may be separated, put into different streams based on assumptions of intelligence, as determined by an IQ test. This might not account for cultural variation, being a newcomer, and again, it assumes one way of knowing how to be intelligent in society and giving power to those that have this assumed intelligence. Charisma. It's one that maybe we don't think about a lot, but it is quite prioritized. Social skills, making eye contact, smiling in the workplace, extroversion is often quite valued as well. That does make it more challenging for those who are neurodivergent to participate in social spaces where there may be an assumed lack of desire to participate rather than wanting a different way to participate. Independence. This one's I find quite interesting because it is one that our society values a lot. But I think for most of us, when we start interrogating independence in our own lives, we find we're quite interdependent in the way that we live our lives. For example, today someone might have made you coffee, made you breakfast. Someone might be handling daycare needs, or someone's walking your dog today so that you could be here. So, in reality, we're quite interdependent, but our society really values people who present as very independent. And someone who lives with support or assistance in order to participate in their community is not seen as the same hierarchical standard as someone who appears to not need support to participate in their community. And finally, motivation and drive. Our society considers people to be more successful if they have self motivated desire to work more, complete more tasks, and this can be observable behavior about how their productivity is valued. But we know that there are many ways of being and knowing and doing things. So, how does this in the end reflect? So, taken together, thinking about those valued attributes and those common representations of active bodies, this shows us how pervasive the logic of ableism is. Ableism is the attitudes, actions, and circumstances that devalue people because they are disabled or perceived as having a disability. So, how can we begin to shift this perspective? We can start with language. It's often something people worry about or think a lot about when they're interacting with people in the disability community. In this cartoon, you can see that the person standing in the foreground is saying, "So, what do you prefer to be called? Handicapped, disabled, or physically challenged?" And the person using the wheelchair says, "Joe would be fine." So, when we start with language, a person's name is, of course, a great way to start. Person first language is also a way to begin, thinking about framing the person first as their identity and their disability just follows that, such as a person who uses a wheelchair or a person who experiences or has Down syndrome. Of course, in disability cultures, language choices vary widely. And as you get to know someone, they may have their own preferred terms and language. And it's also important to remember that disability is not a bad word. And what do we mean by disability? There are many models, but two I'll talk about for contrast are the medical model and the social model. The medical model is more a traditional way of thinking, and it's one that's quite prevalent in our society for understanding what disability is. It affixes a label to the person and views their impairment as the limitation to their participation in community and activities. The focus of this model is often on improving or even fixing or resolving the disability that that person has. However, if we consider the social model, this is also more relevant to our context because we're not approaching disability from a medical lens, but rather a social or community perspective. In the social model, we consider that the barriers people encounter, such as the built environment, the way that communication is done, systemic barriers in terms of what rules and policies we have in place, those barriers create the disability as it prevents folks from participating fully in community life. Instead of focusing on changing the impairment that they experience, we focus on alleviating the barriers that they encounter. So, in the images here, it's contrasting two ideas around staircases. For the medical model, The problem that would be identified is that the person experiences an impairment where they cannot walk up the stairs. So, to address that, we need to change or fix the body so it can walk up the stairs. In the social model, the approach to the staircase is the stairs are the problem. We need to use ramps so that everyone can access the next level. We can also consider a disability affirming approach. So, that disability is an identity viewed positively. Disability culture is valued, it's worth celebrating, and we can consider disability representations of people simply living their lives without those stories having to be inspirational or eliciting sympathy or empathy. They're just like everyone else. So, disability identity is something to be viewed positively, culture worth celebrating, and considering those representations. Think critically about the messages we receive about disability in the media, online, in social media, in other communications. What are those stories saying? What is the tone, the framing, and the language of the story and message about disability that we receive? Thinking about that, what are about the messages we create and circulate ourselves? All right. So next we'll talk a bit more about creating inclusive spaces. On the next slide, I have a video. So we'll hope that this works. We did test it, but I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear any feedback.
Good morning, Bob.
Morning there, big man. Morning, Alice!
There's no need to be awkward.
Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention! Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping?
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What?
Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't address me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
I don't know. I think he said he was gonna come. Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath. Relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Alice.
Right.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
There's no need to be awkward.
Awesome. So that's a video that we like at the Stedward Center to use to just kick off our conversation about creating more inclusive spaces. So what do we mean when we say inclusion? So that can include services, programs, and spaces designed to meet the needs of all individuals rather than trying to fit someone into an existing program. So think about inclusion is different than integration or assimilation. Inclusion recognizes the rights of all individuals to access and participate in physical activities that are of interest to them, and everyone experiences a sense of belonging. So it's really creating a welcoming social environment that people feel like they can be themselves in, and that being themselves is welcome and important. When considering facilities and the physical spaces and the programs that we have, a tool that is available to try and measure where we're at and find room for improvement is the Aimfree Accessibility Instrument. So accessibility and inclusion go together. Accessible design applied to recreation and parks facilities and the workplace provide the foundation for inclusive spaces. And this audit measures barrier-free access in recreation facilities and identifies those key areas for improvement, whether it's the physical space or maybe a program or a policy that could be doing better. And if you're interested in this tool, please reach out at the Stedward Center to learn more about it, and we can help you arrange an audit if it's something that's interesting to you. Considering accessible design, we can also think about the principles of universal design, something that might sound familiar. So universal design has its beginnings as an architectural theory, but you can also find this work has been applied to making universal design for programming, for services, and for education. So universal design, by definition, is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without adaptation or specialized design. So really for all. The principles include equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, a tolerance for error, low physical effort, and the size and space for approach and use. So clear space. To get a bit more into universal design, as a for instance, we're just going to look at a case study. So this is the Ability Center in Durham, just outside of Toronto. It was built in 2012, and at the time, really a leader in universal design and accessible design. This facility has been award-winning. It's 125,000 square foot facility and thought of as an inclusion incubator where the programs can be built, scalable, and supported to teach provincially, nationally, and globally. So the Ability Center delivers programs and services in the areas of education, employment, sport, rec and leisure, research, and life skills. So we're going to take kind of a mini tour of some of the features that the Ability Centers has. So here we can see the atrium and the front entrance, and kind of a main feature of it right in the center is ramping. So this design is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. The space is quite open, multiple ways to access the second floor, but the universal way, the way that would work for almost all people, the ramp is the main feature of this atrium space, with stairs and elevators almost as like a secondary choice or option that are more off to the side. There's also wide space so that people could move in many different ways to get from point A to point B, and comfortable waiting spaces for people that are waiting on rides, are waiting on aids, accessible transit, or just to encourage community gathering. Another feature is the universal design principle of perceptible information. Laid out beside the elevator, you can see the different ways that they denote what you can find on each floor. The wayfinding signs are incorporating different colors, images, words, and braille, so that there would be many ways to try and match the idea of the room that you're looking for to the actual room when you get there. So the sign beside the elevator would appear again beside the room once you get to that floor. So the colors can really be helpful to people identifying the space as they travel throughout the building. And like I said, there's also Braille incorporated into these signs as well. And the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. So for instance, on our next slide, we will look at sort of a universally designed change room, but the shower stall uses temperature controlled sensors. This reduces the risk of someone accidentally turning on the shower and accidentally turning it on too hot. We can also consider the principle of low physical effort. So door handles in all rooms, which is going to be a lower physical effort than like a doorknob where you have to pinch and grasp to be able to turn and open the door. Automatic doors are also a great option. Thinking about the bathrooms, auto flush toilets, sensor sinks, and again, sensors in the showers. And for the change room, low height lockers or lockers available at many different heights so that someone can access it in a way that's comfortable and easy for them. Also thinking about folks that would be accessing a locker from the height of a wheelchair. So as I said, this is kind of the shower or universal change room design. At the time in 2012, it would have been called a family change room, but now we would call it a universal or fully private change room. As you can see, there's kind of a barrier-free roll in to the shower if someone was to use a wheelchair. There's a wide bench for resting, changing, being able to access personal care needs. And the purpose of this space was so that people could get changed and ready for physical activity and have access to the support that they need. Enough space to be used by someone with a support worker or a support worker of a different gender, and have access to change tables as well. It's also important to consider that if we could design all the showers to be a universal access, then someone who might need the accessible shower, it doesn't have to wait in line if it's being currently used. If you have 3 showers, they're all in use. Someone maybe came out of the pool, they're ready to have their shower and go home, they can only use the accessible one, now they have to wait. So if we could do it universally so that they would have all their shower options available, then that eliminates waiting for that person. But of course, it's more than a gym. When we think about considering inclusive recreation, think beyond the activity spaces. Make sure that the registration process, either virtually or in person, is accessible to people with a range of disability experiences, and communication materials, such as the pictures of people in the brochures and program guides, are including representations of people of all abilities. Additionally, many people assume the focus is on increasing the supports available for participants experiencing disability. However, ensuring staff have access to accessible spaces and training materials is also vital. If you want to hire more people experiencing disability, you need to make sure that the staff person has access to a space that works for them. For example, what's the lunchroom like? Are staff meetings held in an accessible room? And are training materials provided in multiple formats? So thinking about that collaborative and engaged inclusive piece, because after all, inclusion is a social experience. From the community, we know that it is important and necessary to involve people who experience disability in the decisions that will affect them. It is crucial. If you want to learn more about disability or improve the inclusion and accessibility that you can offer, members of the community themselves have got to be involved. This quote says, "You got to involve the disability community. This is just harsh and you shouldn't take it personally, but like you shouldn't be teaching disability if you don't have the disability community involved. You just shouldn't. It's not right." That's my criticism about simulations, which is a way of teaching disability where the people with lived experience would not be involved. If there's nobody with a disability involved in it, there's no value. You're just wasting your time and opportunity for such great teaching. It's a wasted opportunity when you don't include people with disabilities. However, what if I don't know anyone who identifies as disabled to start this community engagement? Well, you can reach out into the community. Volunteer, attend events, connect with current events in the news that are affecting the community that experiences disability. Read stories, books, and articles written by people with lived experience of disability, such as disability visibility. You can listen to podcasts, you can engage with art and film, and remember that not all disabilities are visible, and individuals will have different perspectives on whether or not they choose to self-identify as having a disability, or if they choose to disclose that information that they have a disability. We can also think of applying a customer service standard just across our programming and interactions. This example comes from the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and that regulates many aspects of accessibility in Ontario. They provide customer service standard and training so that folks in a customer service position will be trained and prepared on how to communicate and provide good service for people experiencing disability. At the Studward Center, we've kind of poked around. We haven't really found something similar that Alberta offers, but this link here is still live, even though this program's a bit old, and can be accessed for people interested in this training. But we'll do some of the highlights here. So thinking about communication for people with experiencing various disabilities. So, for example, have communication materials available in alternate formats, such as making registration forms available in large print in addition to online offerings. Also, training staff so that they are know and are prepared to offer different communication formats to people that inquire about them. Interacting with individuals, thinking of those who might use service dogs, assistive devices, or come with an aid or support person. Remember to speak directly to the person with a disability and not the support person first. We want to make sure we're addressing our client, our participant, our future hire first in this situation. The support person is there to support. Also remembering service dogs and putting in place items so that service dogs can be welcomed into your space, whether that's educating other staff or other folks at the facility, so that dog doesn't become a conflict point between other users of the facility or other staff as well. All right. So using equipment on site that may support or assist people with disabilities. So for example, ensure a weight room monitor knows how to use the adaptive fitness equipment and that the front desk associate is familiar on where to find and how to access other routes, such as an elevator. It's really important that folks know not only where adaptive equipment is, what might be available, but how to use it. A lot of the times, something that we do see is that members of the disability community go out to swim somewhere that has a pool lift, but when they arrive at the pool, no one on staff that day knows how to use the pool lift. So that leaves them unable to access the pool. So just having the equipment is important, but even more important is ensuring that your staff training, that everyone knows how to use and operate the equipment. What to do if someone with a disability is having a difficulty accessing a desired service. So being prepared with options For example, if a person who uses a wheelchair would like to take part in a group fitness class, they could recommend a class with off-peak hours that has more space, or maybe a time when the instructor has openings in their schedule and is available to speak with the participant about any modifications or adaptations they might need before the class, or go over what the activities in the class will entail that day. Um, Having prepared options and accommodations in advance so that you can offer choices and folks attending can make the choice that works best for them. But on a personal level, what can I do for accessibility and inclusion? So it is all of our responsibility to create inclusive environments, and there are always actions we can and should do ourselves to create more inclusive communities and spaces. So consider, can you embrace differences or acknowledge that there may be different ways of doing things or moving our bodies? Can you use your voice to advocate for accessible and inclusive spaces? Can you learn about the accessibility supports that are available to you so that you can offer them to others? Can we host events and activities in accessible formats and spaces? And can we ask about people's access needs, be open, and learn from those who know their bodies best? So it might be as simple as just asking the question of, hey, we have this meeting or training happening. Does anyone need something to be most successful in this training that we can provide? Closed captioning, flexible seating, microphones for voice enhancement, and see what people suggest. Be specific about what you can and can't do. And this just comes down to being transparent. Sometimes there are accommodations that we're not going to be able to make, but just being transparent and providing rationale can build that trust in that relationship and help you find if there's maybe something different that will work or a compromise that you can make. For example, it would be wonderful if I could have ASL interpretation for all the events and in-services I provide, but it's too expensive. The Stedworth Center can't afford it. So if someone was inquiring if that accommodation was available, I'd say, unfortunately, I don't have ASL interpretation available at all my events. We can't afford it in our budget, but we can try and work it so that closed captioning would be available or a transcript will be available. Is that something that could work? And remember, include the voices and choices of participants and staff experiencing disability. Their lived experience is so valuable and will be able to guide the decisions that need to be made around accessibility and inclusivity for your space. Be reflective and purposeful in your actions. We have to start somewhere, but being open to feedback, being willing to do things differently, and if we get something wrong, being able to reflect on that and do better next time is key. Remember that disability is one facet of identity. We all bring different life experiences, different backgrounds to our intersectional identities, and disability is just one piece of the puzzle for those that experience it. Disability is a social construct. Remembering that from our social model of disability, disability is experienced because of the barriers that are in place. And impairment is experienced on a continuum. So even if two people seem to have the same disability, their experience of that disability is going to be different and unique. So remember to keep an open mind to everyone that you meet. Looking ahead to next time, there will be kind of a part 2 on building inclusive and accessible recreation and park spaces. And next time we'll be looking at growing leaders in recreation and sport from athletes, youth, and young adults in the disability community by learning more about Athletes to Coaches, a training and leadership program, and Becoming Para-Ready, which gets sport clubs, sport organizations ready to include athletes experiencing disability. A bit more before I go, there's some resources for deeper learning. So the building blocks of quality participation are a research-based resource with 6 building blocks that were derived from uh, survey research, interview research with people experiencing disability. And each element is an important quality towards quality participation and how to integrate that into programming and facilities. Something else to consider is the Adapted Physical Activity Graduate Certificate that is offered through the Faculty of Kinesiology, Sport, and Recreation. Most of it or all of it might now be online for your asynchronous learning and can also be laddered into a master's degree. And for more learning, this book is a really great resource called Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau, an author with lived experience. She's from the States. So some of the context is American when we're talking about current events and history in the disability community. But it's a really great one that breaks down language use, how to be an ally, how to advocate, all those things. And some more resources. And like Callie said, I will be sharing my slides. So you'll be able to click through these links and not try and write down these many, 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 many letters. But from the Canadian Disability Participation Project, I also wanted to flag the employment resources and research that they have available, super relevant to this group. The Canadian Disability Participation Project is kind of a nationwide research partnership that Stedwart's been a part of as well. We focus mostly on the projects of children in play, but there is a branch of this project focusing on employment. We can also look at resources in terms of play and play spaces, sports and parasport, and then that accessibility training that we mentioned before. The link there is once again. And any questions in our last 5 minutes?